So this is a video I didn't really want to make, but I feel kind of compelled to go ahead and do it. It's another video about ChrisBeatCancer, and if you've subscribed for my diet videos or videos about Robert Morse, don't worry, there will be more soon. If you've not seen my previous videos about Chris, I'll put a link to the playlist in the description, but just to quickly recap, Chris is a promoter of alternative medicine and cancer conspiracy theories. Some of his most popular videos are interviews with people who claim to have healed their cancer naturally, and I previously showed how dubious these stories are, with so many of them receiving surgery like Chris did, or chemo, radiation. Many of them are still sick or their story doesn't make any sense. Worst of all, some of the people who are featured in these survivor testimonials are now dead. Which brings us to the subject of today's video. Chris interviewed April Saull in 2018 and she claimed to have healed her cancer naturally. Now, I know most viewers aren't going to watch more than a few minutes of this, so I'm going to start with the punchline. April is dead, and she died from cancer. So let's take a look at her story and see if we can learn anything interesting. April was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer in 2016 while she was pregnant, and her doctors tried to figure out a treatment plan. Because her case was complicated, a lot of different doctors with different specialities were involved. April was arrogant and dismissive right from the start. Here's what Chris and April had to say about the team of doctors who assembled to try and save her life as well as her baby's life.
So there were all kinds of doctors standing around my bed and were trying to come up with this plan.
Trying to figure out a way to make some money off of you.
Yes, of course.
How can we all get together and get a piece of this?
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
This kind of misunderstanding and confusion about the motivations of a medical team, their competency and qualifications is a common theme in April's story. April doesn't really seem to understand what's going on, but she's also convinced that she knows better than her doctors. Here she is trying to describe where her cancer was.
You know, it was all over my bones. It was all over my pelvis. And there were also places I can't even pronounce. I mean,
Right.
the list went on.
Yes, body parts you've never heard of. I get it.
Yeah.
Despite this, it seems that April was initially compliant with the treatment. She had some chemo during the pregnancy, she had a child, and she had radiation and surgery to get her walking again. And it was around this time that she came across the whole cannabis cures cancer conspiracy in the form of Rick Simpson. Rick made a documentary called Run from the Cure, and he's pretty famous for his cannabis oil protocols. So what did April find so convincing?
I was doing some research and I come across a Facebook post, and it was 60 grams of cannabis oil in the plastic applicators, and it said cancer cure, really big, really big. So of course that caught my eye. So I jumped on YouTube, watched Run from the Cure, and I thought, what does this guy have to gain from this? You know, he's got nothing to gain from this. So I just believed it. And then how he had people talking, testimonials like me, you know.
So let's be clear, even if Rick really did have nothing to gain from this, that doesn't mean he's right. And the idea that he has nothing to gain is bogus anyway. Rick Simpson is making money from his books and speaking events. Obviously, he can't sell cannabis oil to patients directly because that would make him an international drug dealer and a doctor without a license. So April's reasoning here has fallen way off the mark. April started on the Rick Simpson protocol, which is basically getting really high all the time eating cannabis oil. Now, from my perspective, there's nothing really wrong with using cannabis recreationally, but I think it's quite unfortunate for someone to use it under the misguided impression that it's going to heal their cancer. Cannabis is, after all, a drug of abuse, and April demonstrated some of the elements of addiction even in the short time she used it. She relied on it to deal with her stress, and she rapidly developed a tolerance to it. So following her 3 months on the Rick Simpson protocol, April refused the 15 rounds of chemo recommended to her by her doctor. April was completely convinced that the cannabis oil caused her tumor markers to decrease, and this forms a big part of her story. But we shouldn't forget that she also had surgery, chemo, and radiation to treat her cancer, and there is often a delay between the application of treatment and the decrease in tumor markers. April never seems to have understood this. She continued going to the hospital for CAT scans, and the doctors told her that the cancer would always be in her bones. This finally culminated in a PET scan where she was apparently given the all clear by a nurse practitioner.
So I get the PET scan, and I knew this is like the moment of truth. And she said, they're concerned with the spot on your leg. Just like that, completely scared me. It ended up being a little inflammation around my surgical rod, probably from the scan itself. And then she proceeds to say, but other than that, it's negative. So whatever you did, it worked. And then she goes, so that's lovely. And she passed me the report.
Well, I don't know the details of April's story, and no one is going to see her medical records, but this part doesn't seem to make sense to me. To the best of my imagination, even in the absence of any active cancer showing up on the PET scan, her doctor would have probably still been recommending the chemo. Perhaps this is another instance of April not understanding what her medical team were telling her. Whether she genuinely received the all clear or not, she certainly refused the recommended treatment path and eventually came to believe that cannabis oil cured her. Sometime during all this, April started a business on the back of her supposed success story, and she started coaching cancer patients, charging them for Skype sessions, text messages, and group meetings. So it's hard to feel completely sorry for April here. On the one hand, she was someone struck with a terrible disease, and she did her best to try and help herself. On the other hand, she got it profoundly wrong, and her attitude towards the medical staff who tried to help her can only be described as arrogant. And setting up a consultancy to take money from other desperate people for her ill-informed advice is quite frankly revolting. I think it's almost certain that through her interview with Chris, her Facebook group in particular, and her consulting activities, April has accelerated other people's journeys into the grave as well as her own. And you'd think that was the end of the story, but it's not. April's video is still up on Chris Walk's channel, and the post is still live on his website. In the past, Chris has simply deleted these posts when someone has died. Maybe he's been watching my channel and realized how bad it makes him look to hide the deaths of his interviewees. Chris has posted that April was diagnosed with liver cancer, and I have to say, this is a very dubious claim to make. Consider the following. April's doctor told her that her breast cancer would never go away. It would always be in her bones. April's original symptoms returned. Cancer can have all kinds of unpleasant symptoms, but being unable to walk was a characteristic of April's initial disease. Although Chris said that April died from liver cancer, April's sister messaged me and told me that the doctors found another tumor in her breast. Finally, April's obituary states that her cancer returned and spread to her liver. So why does it matter if April died from liver cancer or breast cancer which spread to her liver? Well, if Chris accepts that she died from breast cancer, he'd also have to accept that when he interviewed April, they got it badly wrong, and she didn't heal herself. In my opinion, this talk of liver cancer is nothing but a red herring, so Chris can avoid facing the truth. If you're buying into this, I have to tell you, I think you're being stupid. When a stage 4 breast cancer patient dies from cancer, you can be pretty sure that she died of the cancer she was suffering from. And this is exactly what her doctors told her would happen. And let's be real, in the unlikely circumstance that this was an independent case of liver cancer, all the lifestyle changes she lectured people on didn't prevent it, and the second round of cannabis oil certainly didn't cure it. So I just want to address a couple of final points here, because I can already predict the boring comments about how it was really the radiation that killed her, or how conventional medicine didn't cure her either. The reason I made this video isn't to prove that natural treatments don't work or conventional treatments do work. You can't prove that with one story. I made this video because it's a kind of anti-testimonial. April's video with Chris was made with the exact intention of proving that cannabis can cure cancer. Now that she's dead, I think it's fair to say that her argument has been rather undermined. So the point of this video is to show people that this situation is more complicated than just watching a video and being inspired. Clearly, some breast cancer survivors who took only conventional treatment lived far longer than April did, and of course, some lived for even less time. This is why researchers run controlled scientific studies, to try and understand which treatments work and which don't when results vary so much between individuals. So that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel and rate the video up so more people will see it. I read the comments and try to respond to them all. If you want to leave me some nasty comment about how this is so unfair on April or her family, just bear in mind that I'm doing this to try and prevent more people going down her path. If you care so deeply about April, the Gofundme is still up and you can leave a donation for her children. The link is below. I've also put a link to the blog Fact Checking ChrisBeatCancer, which is not written by me, but if you like these videos, you should check it out. So let's end this with some more clips of April trashing the people who tried to save her life.
They're giving women cancer through these preventative therapies. It's insanity. It's insanity. I look at these people like psychopaths walking around in white coats. That's my perception.
And I went down to Duke for a second opinion too, and the doctor down there was recognized by Time Magazine as one of the top 100 most influential people in the world. So they, and you walk in there and they have marble from 3 floors up, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they must really have the answers. No, they don't. It's a golden standard across the board.
Anyway, so she doesn't face me. I haven't seen my oncologist since right when I started to get well. Because she was he watched my stuff. I'm always talking about how reassuring she was. That's what bothers me. It's one thing. I know they have their hands tied, right? They have their hands tied, I know. But what bothers me is how she was trying to talk me into it, And then the way she turns a blind eye. That's evil. That's evil. Because she knows,